Love after 60. 3 ways God introduces you to your soulmate without you realizing it. See them before it's too late.
Welcome to Wise Life After 60. So grateful to have you here. Have you ever crossed paths with someone and felt an almost unshakable sense that you'd known them long before your first hello? Not in the dramatic way movies portray, but in a quiet, almost sacred recognition, as if God Himself had been arranging the meeting long before you could see it. Those moments can catch us off guard, and yet they carry a weight that lingers in the heart. In this video, I will share with you 3 subtle yet extraordinary ways God may be introducing you to your soulmate without you even realizing it. Because love after 60 is not the same as love in our 20s. We have walked through loss, joy, mistakes, and redemption. Our hearts know that true connection isn't about completing each other, but about walking side by side in a life that honors God's timing. And His timing is rarely rushed. He weaves threads between 2 people long before they even notice, sometimes through what seem like coincidences, unexpected detours, or even interruptions we didn't want. Only later do we see that every step had a purpose. Before we begin, I hope you'll take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Wise Life After 60 to open the love's quiet miracles. So, pour yourself a warm cup of tea or coffee, settle into your favorite chair, and come with me as we explore the first way God may be introducing you to the person meant to walk with you through the rest of your journey.
Way number 1. Through old wounds. Sometimes, the way God introduces us to our soulmate after 60 doesn't begin with joy or excitement, but with discomfort, even pain. It can come through what I call the path of old wounds. By this stage in life, we've lived through decades of love, loss, and lessons, and we've learned to carefully tuck certain memories and emotions away, believing they're behind us for good. But God, in His wisdom, knows that real love, the kind that lasts in our later years, is not just about companionship, it's about restoration. Carl Jung once said that sometimes we meet people not to love them instantly, but because they serve as a mirror, reflecting back the hidden parts of our soul, the hurts, fears, and unhealed places we've carried quietly for years. When such a person walks into our life, it can feel unsettling at first. They may say something, or simply be themselves, in a way that touches a nerve we didn't even realize was still raw. And yet, if we have the courage to stay present, to look past the initial discomfort, we often find that God is using them to draw out what needs to be healed, not just so we can move forward, but so we can truly open our hearts again. I've experienced this, and I've watched it happen to others. Over time, the reconnection doesn't happen through dramatic declarations, but through small, careful exchanges. With each conversation, a little more of the heaviness lifts. It's not only about apology or forgiveness, it's about allowing the light of truth to fall on an old wound so it can finally close. And somewhere in that process, we realize this is more than a friendship being restored. It's the foundation of a deeper bond, one built not on avoiding pain, but on moving through it together. In love after 60, this is especially powerful. Sometimes, God's way of introducing us to the person He intends for us doesn't look like romance at first sight. Sometimes, it looks like reconciliation. It's the conversation that begins with a lump in your throat and ends with a piece you didn't even know you were missing. It's the person you thought was gone forever returning, not just to share your days, but to help you become whole in ways you never expected. I remember a woman in our congregation telling me about a man she reconnected with after 30 years apart. They had dated briefly in their youth, but life pulled them in different directions, leaving behind misunderstandings that had never been resolved. When they met again, both widowed, their first conversations were careful, almost guarded. But as they filled in the missing pieces of their stories, they discovered the misunderstandings had been built on nothing more than assumptions. Once those melted away, what remained was a deep respect for the person standing before them, not as they once were, but as they had become. She told me that what moved her most was realizing they had both been refined by the trials of life, that God had been at work shaping their hearts through joy and loss, so that when they met again, they were ready to see each other clearly. The gratitude they shared was not for a love rekindled exactly as before, but for the gift of starting again, not as two people clinging to the past, but as two souls meeting fresh, with decades of wisdom between them. This is why I believe God sometimes chooses the path of old wounds to lead us to our soulmate in our later years. It's not about reopening the hurt just to relive the pain. It's about uncovering the places where His love, working through another person, can finally bring healing. And that healing is not a side effect. It is the very soil in which lasting love can grow. It prepares us to love with a clean heart, unburdened by grudges or regrets, and free from the shadows that once haunted us. So if you find yourself face to face with someone from your past, and the encounter stirs emotions you didn't expect, don't be too quick to dismiss it as coincidence or inconvenience. It may be that God has been quietly preparing this meeting for years, weaving together the threads of your separate journeys until the time was right. And when His timing is right, love and healing are often woven together so tightly you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Because God doesn't just send someone to love you in this season of life. He sends them to help you become the fullest, truest version of yourself. And in that sacred process, the bond you form will be rooted not only in deep affection, but in the holy work of becoming whole together. If you've ever experienced a reconnection like this, or wondered if an old wound might actually be a doorway God is using to lead you to love, I'd love to hear your story in the comments.
Way number 2, through unexplainable coincidences. There is a way I've seen God work in love after 60 that still humbles me every time, and it comes wrapped in what the world calls coincidences. We give them names like chance encounters, lucky timing, or being in the right place at the right time. But when you've lived this long, and you've seen the way God threads together the smallest details of your days, you stop believing in pure chance. You begin to see these moments for what they really are, His fingerprints, gently pressed into the fabric of your life. They are not accidents. They are quiet signposts whispering, "This is the way I've prepared for you." And when you're no longer chasing love, when your heart has slowed to a steadier rhythm, these moments seem to arrive more often and with more clarity. I know a man in his late 60s who swears his second great love began because of a traffic jam. He was on his way home from a doctor's appointment, frustrated by the delay, when he turned off onto a side road and stopped at a small gas station he'd never been to. As he was filling his tank, someone called his name. He turned to see a woman he hadn't spoken to since their teenage years, back when they were both in the same church youth group. What could have been a quick, polite hello turned into coffee the following week, and in time, a marriage that neither of them could have predicted. If the traffic had been clear that day, he told me, I would have gone straight home. I think God put every car in my path on purpose to slow me down enough to see her again. The beautiful thing about these divine appointments is how effortless they feel. Not because they are insignificant, but because the work has already been done in advance. God has been aligning paths, softening hearts, and preparing the ground long before you even knew you'd be standing on it. That's why, when you finally meet, there's often a strange sense of familiarity. Not a dramatic rush, but a peaceful recognition. It's as if a missing piece of your life's puzzle has quietly slipped into place, and you didn't even realize how much you needed it until it was there. After 60, these moments take on a depth and weight that's hard to explain until you've lived through them. By now you've learned, sometimes the hard way, that timing isn't just a detail, it's the foundation. You know that even the most wonderful person can't be a blessing if the season isn't right. And you've also seen how the right person, at the right season, can step into your life and change it in ways you never could have scripted. That's why when God places someone in your path during this chapter of life, there's often a quiet sense of readiness in your heart, a readiness you could never have forced or manufactured in your younger years, no matter how hard you tried. You find yourself prepared in ways you didn't even know you were being prepared, shaped by every joy, loss, mistake, and redemption you've walked through. Some call it serendipity. Others, divine timing. I've heard people say, "I wasn't looking, and that's when I found them." But I don't believe they found anything. I believe God revealed what He had been working on all along. It's easy to dismiss that as romantic thinking, especially if you've been waiting for love for a long time. But when you've walked enough miles with Him, you start to trust that He is always working behind the scenes, not just to bring someone into your life, but to bring the right someone, the one who will bring joy, healing, and companionship in a way that reflects His love. If you've experienced a meeting that felt ordinary at the time, but left an unshakable mark on your heart, don't brush it aside. Pay attention. Ask God what He might be showing you. These are the thin places, where the space between our everyday plans and His eternal purposes grows so narrow that His light spills through. And if you haven't yet had such a meeting, trust that age is no barrier to His creativity. Whether you are 60, 70, or beyond, His desire to bless you with love and companionship remains as strong as ever. In the end, these coincidences are one of His most tender ways of writing love stories in our later years. They remind us to keep our eyes open and our hearts soft, because at any moment, in the most ordinary of settings, the extraordinary can unfold, and it may just be the beginning of a love you never saw coming, but that God had been planning for you all along. If this part of the video spoke to your heart, please give it a like so more people can be reminded that God's timing is always perfect. You never know. Your words and your encouragement could be exactly what someone else needs today.
Way number 3. Through an unusual peace. There is a way God introduces love after 60 that may be the quietest of all, yet it is also the most unmistakable once you have felt it. It is not the dizzy rush of youthful infatuation, nor the nervous anticipation that once kept you up at night when you were younger. No, it is something far deeper, far steadier, and far rarer. It is an unusual peace. I have come to believe that the soul often recognizes its match before the mind does. And when it does, the feeling that floods your spirit is not urgency, not longing, but a calm so profound it almost feels like a holy place you've stepped into. You do not feel the need to impress, perform, or protect yourself. You simply feel at home. After 60, this kind of peace can be almost disorienting at first. We have been taught, through stories and songs, that love must arrive with fire and fireworks, with grand gestures and dramatic chemistry.
But with time and life experience, we discover that those flames can burn out quickly if there is no enduring warmth beneath them. So when God brings someone whose presence feels like the steady heat of a hearth rather than a bonfire, it can surprise us. You may not even label it love at the start. You may think you've just met a kindred spirit, a new friend who happens to share your values, your sense of humor, or your way of seeing the world. And yet, under the surface, something far more enduring is quietly being built. I've spoken to many men and women in their 60s and 70s who have felt this same thing. One woman told me she met a widower in a Bible study group and was struck by how natural their conversations felt. They never tried to impress each other. They simply talked, sometimes about scripture, sometimes about their gardens, sometimes about the aches of grief they had both endured. She told me it wasn't until months later that I realized how much I looked forward to seeing him. I thought I was just enjoying his company, but looking back, I see that God was slowly stitching us together in the quiet. That kind of love does not explode into your life. It grows roots before it grows flowers. And perhaps that is why this peace is so essential for love after 60. By this point in life, we understand that the heart needs more than excitement to be sustained. It needs stability, consistency, and the quiet assurance that the person beside us will be there not only in the bright days, but also in the ordinary ones. We've lived long enough to know that trust is not something that can be hurried. It grows slowly over time, and it cannot be manufactured by charm or appearances. God knows this about us, and so in His wisdom, He often begins by giving us the gift of feeling utterly safe with someone long before we even realize that we are falling in love. I think of it as the difference between a house you rent and a home you've lived in for decades. With the first, you are always aware that it may not be yours to keep, so you hesitate to plant roots. With the second, you settle in. You hang your pictures without worrying about the walls. You walk through the rooms in the dark because you know them by heart. And you rest at night without wondering if you belong there. That is what this peace feels like when God is introducing you to the person meant to walk with you in your later years. It feels like finding the place your heart can finally rest. If you ever encounter someone who brings you this kind of calm, I urge you not to dismiss it simply because it does not feel like the dramatic love stories you've heard. Passion may begin loudly, but peace lasts. And in God's design, the love that endures is often the one that begins quietly, under the gentle covering of His timing and care. If the soul knows before the mind does, trust the soul. Let that peace be the compass that points you toward what He has prepared for you. Because when you are older, love is no longer about being swept away. It is about being anchored. It is about knowing that the storms may come, but the anchor will hold. And when God anchors you to another person through that unmistakable, unusual peace, it is His way of saying, you are home now. And in that home, whether it is a place, a shared life, or simply the embrace of the one He's given you, your heart can finally rest without fear of losing what matters most.
When I look back on these 3 ways God can bring love into our lives after 60, I'm reminded that none of them rely on our timing, our plans, or even our expectations. They rely on Him, and that is why they are so beautiful.
Because when love comes this way, we can rest knowing it was never forced, never manufactured. It was written into our story by the one who knows us better than we know ourselves. Maybe as you've been listening, a memory has stirred in your heart, a face, a meeting, a conversation you once thought was small, but now feels different. Or maybe you are still waiting, wondering if it's too late. Let me tell you this, God's timeline doesn't expire when we reach a certain age. If He has written companionship into your story, He can bring it to you in a moment, in a meeting, in a way so gentle you won't even realize it's happening until it's already here. If this conversation has touched something in you, don't forget to tap like this video and subscribe to Wise Life After 60 so we can keep walking together through these reflections on faith, love, and the later chapters of life. And as you go about your week, keep your heart open. Pay attention to the people God places in your path. You never know when a healing word, a shared laugh, or a quiet moment of peace might be the beginning of the love story He's been preparing for you all along.